Take a deep breath. Do you know how many times the Bible says, do not be afraid? You should know. A lot. In fact, one for every day, 365 times. It kind of causes the other effect, though. Like, do not be afraid. It's like, I better be afraid, right? Like, anyway, what does do not be afraid mean? And, as we gather, I am reckoning and reflecting a lot more how precious and how really what a gift it is for us to come together and worship. I find that worship can be like a routine, but sometimes it's a way for us to gather when the world is heavy. This is kind of the place where we remind ourselves who we are, whose we are. We reign our hope again, and despite the brokenness, we rehearse it, right? In some ways, the church is kind of like a laboratory where we practice our muscles. So in this story, which is clearly not a story that you've ran into first time, I want you to be able to picture yourself. Maybe cast yourself in one of the characters in the Bible. I want to bring you up Simon here, though, Peter. Peter, when he sees Jesus telling him to, let me get onto your boat, what is Jesus' relationship with Simon Peter at this time? Nothing. I mean, we know that they had a brief encounter in chapter 4, but I mean, he probably knew what was going on, and there was a lot of crowd, The fishermen came back from a night of just unsuccessful, nothing, caught nothing. And here's everyone on the shore huddling and crowding. And Jesus says, let me see your boat. Okay, sure. I wanted to imagine what Peter was thinking at this time. He probably knew some reputation about Jesus, and he's gathering crowds, so maybe he's kind of listening and kind of going, what's going on? But I'm also imagining the people who are gathered there watching these fishermen pull their nets, and clearly there's no fish. People watching it, and I'm wondering, this is the last place I want to be. I don't want people to see me watching me doing this here. I had a really unsuccessful night. It's just me, all my friends here too, right? Probably feeling low. I don't know. If you were to ask yourself, what is something that I might find myself being fearful of? Would you be able to answer that? What am I fearful of? Linda, you're nodding your head. Do you know exactly for sure? It's not spiders, right? No, okay. What are some things that we might be afraid of in modern days? Snakes, don't forget snake. Although snake again, they're right, rebirth, regeneration. There's a wisdom, intuition. There's some really amazing characteristics of the divine. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. COVID, bird flu. Yeah. It was interesting. Somebody said maybe the coronavirus was less about the virus, but it was more about the fear. Fear that, yeah, things that we don't have really control over. What are some other things that we might be scared of, fearful of? Yes. Thanks for reminding me. The current administration, sure, yeah, that's all happening. Terrified. I know, but how does it relate to you personally, though? Is what they're doing up there impacting you? Besides the $8 egg at the grocery store? They test you. They test you, your students. Oh, it's impacting students. Yeah, thank you. Um, mhm. There's a lot of fear, and I have fear too. I have fears about what's going to happen. I have fears about parents who are continually needing, um, hormonal care for their trans children and youth. I'm worried about parents and kids who feel like things are just going to fall off. We named some of the fears, and I want to name some of the unspoken fears too that we struggle with, that we probably don't name, but it is embedded within us. I wonder if we struggle, or we have sometimes fear of unworthiness. Feelings of, well, I'm not worthy. I'm not an expert in that area. You know, what's really interesting about Jesus's intervention at this time, because of the phone call. There's a professor though, when students' phone gets a call, what they're supposed to do, they have to answer. They have to answer in class. Minda, who is it?
It's my Mary Kay consultant.
Now that is a sign. Yeah. Coming back to this feelings of unworthiness is anytime when we feel like it's gonna risk, it's gonna somehow taint on me. So for example, here's what I did. For Vermont Hills Instagram post, I wrote a post that said, many pastors and lay members stay neutral on the topic of politics, fearing division. And yet I wrote, but when you're neutral, it actually strengthens siding with the oppressor, and the vulnerable are left even more vulnerable. I was looking at who would say agree to that and who were triggered by that. I think that's the thing. People even have fear about projecting these kind of truths because we don't know what the response is going to be like. That's a legitimate fear, which blocks us from thinking, maybe I shouldn't bristle my hair there. But notice what Jesus says. First of all, he says, he comes and asks basically things that you're using. So first of all, remember, Jesus comes to you in the most ordinary time. You could be depleted. You could be like, I'm done. Jesus could have said, could I borrow your boat? And you could have said, Jesus, you're a cool man, but seriously, just come next day. Like, not today. I'm done for today, right? But these are the moments when he comes, and I'm just thinking, Peter's probably thinking, do you know who you're talking to? I'm the fisherman here. And you're telling me to cast the net on that side. Do you not know what I just did? He could have read all of them, but instead he says, okay. When Jesus shows this miraculous thing, Peter suddenly comes to an awakening, like, oh, shoot, this was the real deal, and I missed out. I'm so sorry. And all of a sudden, he starts to contract. That's correct. Contract and be restricted, right? This is what we do when we sense unworthiness, we fear some kind of rejection, we fear like something is not on our side. We restrict, we kind of go in small. And that's what I want to say. Fear says, I have to protect myself. But instead, Jesus doesn't rebuke him for the fear that he has. Jesus doesn't say, get right with your fear, but he invites Peter to work through that fear. He literally says, do not fear, but he asks him to walk into that. Do not be afraid. not because fear is wrong, but because fear shouldn't paralyze us. We should not allow fear to paralyze us. And in the moments we find fear, are the moments that wonder Jesus is asking us, can you bring in that awareness of compassion? Awareness for you that you are not unworthy. You put some barrier at yourself right now, thinking you can't do this, that you're not worthy to take up on my task, or you're not worthy to allow me to borrow your things. But no. Courage is not the absence of fear, but it's moving despite it, right? What if our worship was a form of letting go of our fears and allowing compassion to move in? So I want you to think of some of the fears that you are worried about. It could be personal, but it could also be very collective, right? But I want you to, in that moment, bring Jesus in that conversation and says, Barbara, I wonder how you can work, not avoid, but move through it. We so much like to jump. Just get over that hard stuff, right? When it feels uncomfortable, the moment is discomforting. We want to go jump to the next stage where it's going to get us to feel better, right? We're having issues here. Okay, what's the medication? I'm having problems here. Okay, what's the therapy? What's the roll call? But instead of just jumping through, Jesus asks us to not fear, but actually move into it. There is a gift there for us to learn. And maybe it's challenging some of our old beliefs. And so I'd like you to share, if you're willing, with your neighbor in groups of 3, 4, 5. And share what is an actual fear or concern that you have where you are called to be invited to bring in compassion there. And what would it look like if you did have compassion? Okay? Can we take some time to discuss what it would look like instead of avoiding the things that we fear? What would it look like for us to move courageously into it? Any wisdom that was gleaned from your conversation? What did it look like to allow compassion to enter? What? Oh, only got to the fear part. Just open the can of worms, right? I think one of the things
is we don't know what to fear. It's more anxiety than it is fear. It's like, what's going to happen next? What could happen if this? What could happen if that? It's the unknown that is so fearful because we don't seem to have any norms anymore for expectations.
Yeah. And so it's like more so you need a firm grounding. You need a firm grounding of where you are, and you need to also kind of like internally self-check constantly to say, am I reacting, am I responding, or am I absorbing? Yeah, Kari.
We didn't get very far on the actual prompt, but I think it speaks to something that I've been noticing more widely, is that we all just really need to talk to each other right now. We need to talk to each other in real life, not just on the internet, because so many of us are scared. And to be in the same room with somebody feeling that together is somehow comforting. And I think it leaves us a little more grounded for facing what's to come.
In real life. And thanks for coming in real life, Kari. This whole idea of adding compassion where there's fear is going to be, I think, an essential spiritual discipline moving forward. And I want to add this and close that. Notice that Jesus, I just think it's so fascinating. Jesus calls Peter to do this amazing thing. And I'm always, sorry, my words are blah, blah. I'm struck by Jesus seeking people to come along and to do something just as what Jesus had been doing. And it tells me Jesus is so less focused about him hoarding power, him doing all the thing. He is about decentralizing, putting the power into people's hands, saying, you can do it. You think you're not worthy? You think you aren't? You can. And that's Jesus' point. And so it does mean something for us to come as people of faith, to share, to connect, and to even shed some of our beliefs, but allow Matt to come and start his song because he's ready. Again, our way of worship can be a way that's liberating for us, in a way that we say, yeah, it's hard, but we haven't forgotten who we are, and our voice still remains strong.